On this episode of Star Trek Universe, Georgiou is back, but the film's getting flack. Is it as bad as you've heard, or is the hate undeserved? We'll be bringing you our spoiler-free thoughts, followed by our spoiler-filled thoughts on Star Trek Section 31, right after these words.
How to have fun, anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Welcome to Star Trek Universe, the podcast where you get to listen in on two lifelong friends sit and chat about Star Trek. This week, man. Section 31. My name's Matthew Carroll.
I'm David C. Robertson.
So, we said spoiler-free up top.
Yeah, we did.
I just want to, spoil something for some reason. I just want to be antagonistic.
Yeah.
So, spoiler-free thoughts. What are your spoiler-free thoughts?
Well, let me say, it is not... Rotten Tomatoes has it at 24% right now. The audience scores at 20%. IMDb has it at 4.2 out of 10. And I did want to point this out because I didn't think about it when I was writing my initial first thoughts. Dave Blass, the production designer, said on I think Twitter, a lot of people put a ton of effort into Section 31, given that it was one of the few shows that went around the strike, which means that it didn't go around the strike. People are saying, oh, they're scabs. They're not scabs. It's the writer's strike he's talking about. And I think that does color this. Given that it was one of the few shows that went around the strike, it was a project that kept people working and allowed them to provide for their families, and for that I am grateful. For the audience, it's entertainment. For people in the industry, it's work that puts food on the table, and the folks that worked on this film are really great artists who busted their butts to build, light, and shoot this film. Fair. It's fair to say, and it does paint it in a certain light, because guess what? It's very clear that they could not rewrite a single fucking word of this script while they were shooting it.
Oh, yeah. My general thoughts is it's very contextual. I agree with the reviews. I don't think it's a very good movie. But it feels so clear to me that this was a reworked pilot and not a movie. We know that they were planning to make a show, and I think whoever wrote that show and whoever had those plans, they were on a rail and they knew what story they wanted to tell. Instead of reworking it, they just went ahead with their plans, and it suffers greatly because the plot, the characters, the character motivations and arcs that they're given are so truncated and short. I have my theories about what actually happened in the production, but I just think that overall, if it had been a show, I wouldn't have liked it that much. But I would have been there were things in there that I could have been okay, maybe it just needs to find its legs. It almost gave me certain moments I got kind of Firefly vibes from it, this is sort of ragtag team coming together and trying to throw the team together. And there are certain episodes of Firefly that don't ring as solid as others. And I was okay, maybe if this was an episode, maybe I could get invested and be okay, I want to see where these characters go. Maybe they'll find their legs. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe I'll care by the end of the season. But truncating the story to this hour-and-a-half long 90-minute thing is just, it's a disaster. I think it's one of the worst Star Trek things I've seen.
Yeah, and for his part, Olatunde Osunsanmi, who we've often been impressed with on Discovery, he directed this film, and I mean, I love the Dave Blass context because I had forgotten that it filmed during the writer's strike. It makes me feel better about Tunde because I'm how did he do this? How did he manage to make such a shitty film? And then I went, oh, He couldn't change the script at all.
That's part of the problem, though, is that the direction, he's the director, right?
Yeah.
The direction, it feels like Discovery, which is a TV show. It doesn't feel as well actualized as Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a problem with the writing, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that's a really fair point. But the directing, it just looks like a TV show. It doesn't look elevated. Honestly, it looks worse. There's scenes where like they cut to a map and they're like going across a map to show you what's going on or whatever, and the map looks like I could have drawn it in like paint, and then they're just moving it around the screen. It doesn't look technologically interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It looked terrible.
Yeah.
Some of the effects were terrible.
And we can get into deeper detail when we get to the spoiler-filled segment of the show. But overall, I thought it was a tremendous disservice to Michelle Yeoh. They botched it, man. Like I understand that they were trying to like make sure this thing got made because she's an Oscar winner, and now she's an Oscar winner, so she doesn't have time for a show anymore, for a TV show. They just got to make it into a movie now, and Feckless Husk came to mind. It's a feckless husk of a Star Trek film.
Yeah. For me, I cannot get it out of my head that I think this was here's my theory around what happened. Mm-hmm. I guess you want to get into spoilers because my description here is going to be. Go ahead if you got anything non-spoilery left. I
was just going to say, without getting into spoilers, like, I have seen a few people say they liked this movie. They don't understand why everyone's being down on it. So if you haven't seen it, give it a shot at least.
Sure.
I loathe it. I think it's the worst Star Trek movie I've ever seen. I think it's the worst Star Trek anything I've ever seen, and one of the worst movies I've ever seen. That's low talk from me. That's real bad.
Yeah.
Like I would watch Spock's Brain 3 times in a row before I watch this shit again.
Yeah. I don't feel that bad about it.
I would watch The Empath 4 times before I watch this again.
I don't think this would have been the worst episode of Star Trek I've ever seen. I would think it would. The tone is so strikingly different than most Star Trek, and some of the character introductions and stuff are so like they're bold, and they try to do something different, and they try to set a very different tone for this universe. And I like that. I also really like that they didn't pull punches when it came. Well, I will get into it in the spoilers.
Yeah,
but I think they embrace the kind of evil that Philippa Georgiou was as the Emperor. And I didn't expect that because a lot of people are joining this for the first time, having not watched Discovery, and they're going, who is this character? And it would be really easy to ignore her as the evil emperor and be like, oh, she's just a cool kind of bad guy. She's an anti-hero. But no, they like really did like show her as the emperor and show how sadistic she was, which I think was one of the better choices they made. But the problem was they wanted to tell this story of and really kind of take her from the emperor and really move. We've already seen some character develop on Discovery and move her through. And in my opinion, this is my theory on the show, I think the story they told here was their season 1. I don't think this was the pilot. I think this was, I think the first 40 minutes was the pilot. And after that 40-minute mark, they took the elements that they wanted to include for the rest of the seasons and they truncated it to another 50 minutes, and they rushed through that last 50 minutes. That's how I feel about this. I'm not sure if that's right, but that's what it feels like to me.
I think this was the first 2 or 3 episodes of the proposed series. I feel like that's what it was. And I feel like my problem with it with as far as Yeoh was concerned was they ignored all of her character development and her redemption arc on Discovery and just went into this movie and been like, okay, well, this is for people who haven't seen Discovery. So big recap. She was a murderer. She was genocidal. She was fucking Hitler. Look at all these terrible things that she did. And also now we're supposed to accept her as just like this quirky, like trash talking badass bitch who owns a bar. And you're like, well, okay, but how do you get from A to B?
Right. And that's why I think this thing is truncated. I think that they needed her in that first episode or whatever, and then I think it was supposed to, like, the adventure was supposed to ensue. They realized this big problem is happening and they need to solve it. They need her help to solve it, and then she's thrust into the mission with them. And I think that, like, we were supposed to see more flashbacks, more realizations of what's happened to her, a bunch more character development before the last scene, which shows big character development between the emperor stuff, the empress stuff, and then the last scene is very different. And because it's so truncated, I hate it. And I could have loved it, and I love good character development, but there's multiple things that I felt like they skipped episodes, and I can't really get into it without getting into the spoilers, but.
Yeah. Without getting into spoilers, I can say that there were elements of this that it started out, they were like, it felt like they were going through through like a checklist. They were like, how do we make this not like Star Trek? Make this fresh and new. Let's not make it fresh and new at all. Let's just not make it Star Trek. They were like, okay, well, let's start out. Let's do Hunger Games. All right, then we're going to do Guardians of the Galaxy, but they're more misfitty. You know what? Suicide Squad.
No, 100%.
Shadow of Government. There's Suicide Squad, and then let's do a version of the singing alien from The Fifth Element. And like, hey, you remember how Lucifer abdicated his throne in hell and became a bar owner? Let's do that. Georgiou does that. Right. And it's just like all these fucking things from like sci-fi fantasy, and it's just none of it feels. They just did it all almost exactly like they thought. It's like those B movies that you get direct to DVD that you find in like the $5 Walmart bin that you're like, oh, it's Guardians of the Squad.
That is exactly how I felt about it. It felt like a modern sci-fi movie you find in the $5 bin. Like that you've never heard of, that's sort of like other things you've seen. And it doesn't, with the exception of the references to the Federation and the character of Rachel Garrett, like, this doesn't have to be in Star Trek at all. Like,
Rachel Garrett didn't have to be there at all.
Sure, absolutely. But
there was no reason for her.
Well, I think they were going for her being this, like, you know, sort of cute character that, like, learns to embrace the chaos, but that did not feel earned at all. Like, which is, again, why I think that ending was supposed to be 10 episodes in, not 30, an hour and a half in. Let's get into the spoilers. I'm just tired of talking around it.
Sure. If you haven't seen it, turn us off. But
yeah, go watch it. If you're a Star Trek fan, it's worth watching as an artifact of what might have been or what happened.
It's worth watching to make you appreciate Star Trek V a whole lot more. And Nemesis and Into Darkness.
This is by far worse than those. And again, I reiterate, if it had been a TV show, if that first 40 minutes had aired, I would have been like, that was weird, but let them cook. Let them cook. It'll be like, it might be really cool once the season's over. And instead, I went in thinking they made this a movie. That's like, and I hate feeling that way because I think like a lot of my judgment of this episode, calling it an episode, this movie, is because I was told it was a movie and it was not a movie. It is not a movie. It is clearly a pilot, which with either a couple extra episodes added or just like shoved in content to wrap up the story.
I don't know what I suspect it was just going to be the first couple of episodes, but I mean, it was a story by a couple of different people, and then it was a screenplay by Craig Sweeney. And I can't remember who the other people were. I can pull it up. It's right here. But the story was by Bo Yeon Kim and Erica Lepolt, and the screenplay was by Craig Sweeney. And I think it was gonna be. I think it was a pilot. I think it was like the first 2 episodes, because that, like, even in the trailer when they're like, "Oh, we're putting your lives in your hands," and sitting at the bar, I'm like, that's the last shot of the film. Like, we talked about that. Yeah. And sure enough, that was the last thing. Is like they're sitting around joking around, and they're like, "Oh, let's pull up our hologram from our boss," and it's Jamie Lee Curtis. By the way, Craig Sweeney said in the script he just wrote that it was somebody who was recognizable. and he didn't know who it was going to be. Like, he didn't know what character that was going to be.
I do love that as a reference to Everything Ever All at Once, of course, with Michelle Yeoh and Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah,
I love that.
They're friends, and that's why she did the...
Yeah. So I thought that was a lot of fun. Okay, so here's why I think what I think about the way they truncated this. I think the San storyline does not make sense in the first 2 or 3 episodes. The San storyline should have been the season arc. Like that is, to me, very obvious that they were going for, like, here's the pilot. Somewhere in the middle of the season, I'm thinking the mid-season finale, like the fifth or 6th episode, you get the reveal that San's still alive.
Yeah.
And then the end of the season, you get the fully actualized Georgiou, who's gone through a bunch of change, and she's talked about it, and you understand it better. Because that last scene, when she's hugging him, because the lack of character development that they did on screen, when she's trying to hug him while he's trying to kill the universe, I fully expected her to hug him as a distraction and shove a knife in his chest, because like, that's still the character at that point in this movie. You know what I mean? Like, and it wouldn't even be a bad thing. She's trying to save the universe here. Like, a little deception of a hug would be fine. And it would kind of like show that she's still cold and badass and blah, whatever. Like, that San didn't mean anything to her. It just feels like, it feels to me like that was a season-long arc, and it could have been a great one. Like, the idea of these two nemesis that, like, want to rule the empire and all this stuff could have been a really cool thing. Like, I love, like, you know, star-crossed lovers turned enemies fighting across galaxies. That sounds great. That could be really cool. But man, the fact that it was all shoved into an hour and a half felt terrible. Another reason I feel that way is at the end of this thing, she is holding Alok's hand, the captain or whatever. She's holding Alok's hand as they decide to die together. Yeah. I know they had one conversation about how he, like, was an augment who worked for a despot and all that stuff, but that was not enough setup to get them there. Like, it just was not at all. It needed a lot more, and that's why I just feel like it was supposed to be another 6 hours of content in between the starting point and the ending point, and it's just not there. And that the last 50 minutes feels like boom, 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 things happening. And also, in a pilot, you kill one character, like they did. They killed off the Delton, who I'm not Mel. Okay. Mel. They killed off Mel in the what I think was the pilot, and that would have set the stakes. It would have set the tone of the show, and then they go on to kill Zeph, and then they turn Fuzz evil, and then San's alive. Like, the number of reveals, that's not a pilot. That's especially since San dies. Like, if this is a pilot, San would have lived, because then it sets up this, like, ongoing struggle. You wouldn't spend so much time in a pilot building San and then just have him go.
Well, you know, San would be great for burying her past. He was also a character who was completely a holdover from Discovery. Like, they brought up San, and we first saw San here and there in, like, blurs and whatnot in Scavengers and The Sanctuary, 2 episodes of Discovery.
Cool.
And
I'd forgotten that. I didn't remember him.
Yeah. And before Georgiou goes through the Guardian of Forever to show up at the 24th century, she tells Michael, whose name was San, I wish I'd told you about him. And Michael's like, well, tell whoever's waiting on the other side of that portal. Like, Michael's already like, I'm tired of you, go.
Yeah, interesting. That's interesting.
But they wrote themselves into a corner. But when I'm seeing that it's like story by Bo Yeon Kim and Erica Lapolte, I'm like, was it the story? Like, did they write the story for season 1? Did they chart that out and then turn around and go, oh shit, we can't do that?
That's
like,
what I think happened.
I don't doubt that they couldn't change the script after, you know, during the strike while they were shooting, but maybe that's why it took so long to get developed in the first place, is because they were charting out a season, like you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
And then Michelle Yeoh blows up, and they're like, well, shit, let's start trying to, like,
How can
truncate it.
How can we turn this into something? And I think the idea is, instead of saying, okay, we have 90 minutes, we have to change the story. They were like, okay, let's turn our season into a 90-minute movie, and I think it does not work. That's my opinion. I have no idea if that's true. That is my opinion based on what I see on screen. And it's really neither here nor there. I will say shout out to Sam Richardson, played Quasi. I love Sam Richardson, and
he was fun. Yeah,
flawless. He did great. He did great. There was nothing wrong with his character. I liked the shape shifting. I loved that he turned into that huge, like it smacks of Odo, but like a more modern, cooler Odo that does this can do crazy stuff.
It sucks for me because the quirkiness. Like, by the way, even the Fuzz character is from Men in Black. While we're naming off sci-fi movies that they ripped off. But I'm okay with that if you can twist it into something cool. Like, I have for so long wanted Star Trek to be more inventive than just putting bumps on some dude's head. It's a huge universe. I've always thought they should do, like, have characters with superpowers, have weird sci-fi elements. So when I saw that, like, oh, there's got to be like this cyborg character who has like this big mech body armor thing, I wanted to get to know him. I wanted to know why he had this, like, whatever they called it, tech dysmorphia or whatever. Like, I wanted to know more about him. I didn't want a Captain Boomerang knockoff. I didn't want him to be like some jockey dude who says 3 quippy lines that aren't funny and then gets killed.
Yeah. And the one line I liked from him, the one sort of quippy thing was is it Godsend or Godsend? And I enjoyed that little thing.
There was a third option, God Awful, which is...
Yeah, what it always.
Which is, for so long, as a Star Trek fan, I've wanted them to flesh out the Deltans. We got like a little bit of the Deltans in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Like, we know that they take a vow of celibacy because of their pheromones or whatever. I don't know. They pussies do some crazy shit to Starfleet officers. I don't know, but I don't know if there are male Deltans. Expanded Universe seems to think so, but that's Expanded Universe. They did nothing. They did nothing with Mel. They killed her immediately. It's just so much like waste. Don't get, and they didn't, like, I felt more for her family dying at the beginning of the movie. And we had just met them. But what we saw is, one, there were some kids there. So they did trick us a little bit because they did parents and kids. Then they did like, immediately they cared about her. They were happy to see her, and they were like dirt poor living in a wasteland, so you felt bad for them. They did pull some screenplay trickery and made us care about them without actually doing the fucking work.
Hey, but I think that is the work. Like, if you can shorthand us through some like whatever, and you make me care and you give me a feeling, that's your job, and that's cool. I did not care about the Deltan much at all, and like when she died, I really, like, my initial thought was, oh well, there's the pilot death. Like that's how disconnected I was. I'm like watching this and trying to piece it together. It felt like, you know. Mm-hmm.
But, like, my point, though, is that, like, even with the screenplay sleight of hand, which I'm all about, I'm fine with that. I know they do that. Even with that, I shouldn't be sitting there going, I cared more about her family than any of the people who are getting killed off in this movie. Yeah. Who've had, way more time to be developed. And at the same time, I'm sitting there going, like, was it smart to start your movie showing your protagonist murder her family?
I don't think it was necessarily smart with the movie they made, but it was one of my favorite decisions they made because it felt to me like they were really going for it, and they didn't decide to, like, kind of retcon Georgiou's origins. And I think that's great. If you had a season to work her into this, and you get her talking about her discovery experiences and some of the regrets she has. We have a very small amount of the regrets when we find out about like her destroying the godsend or whatever. But like that's about it. And I think we were supposed to have a much longer time before we got to the end where she's like hugging the villain. And I am a sucker for that kind of resolution, like kindness overcoming evil. I love that kind of ending when done well. This was done terribly because I didn't believe it. I kept thinking she's going to stab him. I didn't believe her. I didn't believe that she'd changed that much. Even as someone who saw Discovery, I did not think she would be so naive as to think she could hug her way out of this. And I didn't buy the relationship that well, and I didn't buy that he would be that affected by it. Like the whole thing did not work for me, and that's the biggest problem, I think. And I think it's just because like we did not have enough time with these characters to get to the story they wanted to tell.
Well, okay, so one of my biggest problems, one of the things I kept thinking about with San the entire time, because Bethany looked at me and she was like, "Oh, San is the guy in the mask."
Right.
Yeah. And I was just like, I hope that's not true. It is true. I know it's true, but I hope that's not true. And here's why. Let's just say, like, we know that Section 31 takes place at 2326, early 24th century. Discovery took place at 2255, mid 23rd century. Assuming San and Philippa were the same age, roughly. You know, Michelle Yeoh is 62 at the time, right now, so let's be generous and say that they were both 55 when San faked his death in the Mirror Universe back in 2255. So Philippa is in the 24th century now, 2326, right. After walking through the Guardian of Forever. That would make San 126 years old. We have there's no line in the movie.
Point. Nope, there's no explanation.
There's no explanation. We have seen Philippa go from the 23rd century to the 32nd century, walk through the Guardian of Forever, and now we find out she's in the early 24th century.
Right.
We have all we have is that there were ion storms and there was a passage, and somehow Yan got where he is now. We have no explanation for why he's in the 24th century.
That's a really great point. I think there's plenty of easy explanations they could have used, but they didn't. And it feels to me like something where we would have gotten an episode of backstory about that or something, like what actually happened to San. Like, maybe he went into cryo until her reign was over or whatever. Like, I don't know, whatever. But like, it doesn't explain it at all. So yeah. And we even got that line from the other character, Alok, who said he was a augment who slept for like 100 years, so he was like from our time or whatever. Okay, so like that was kind of cool.
You want to know what's bad about him?
Yeah, sure.
It fucks up the timeline again.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, the augment timeline stuff is
it undid
ridiculous.
The temporal wars, sliding of the eugenics wars into the 21st century, because he said he was from the 20th century where he was in the middle of the eugenics wars and it got turned into an augment. But of course we know now, Strange New Worlds, tomorrow, that the temporal wars factions stopped it from happening in the 90s, and everything shifted forward into the 21st century several years later.
Yeah.
So way to keep up, guys.
Yeah, not keeping up.
Now, here's what I like about it, though.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he said that he became an augment during the eugenics wars in the 20th century means that this happened in the old timeline before the temporal wars shift. So that means this movie is fucking erased. It's not canon.
I don't think we're so lucky.
Honestly, this thing is doing so poorly, I don't think they'll ever mention it again. I think they're just going to move on.
It's really a bummer.
How to have fun, anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
It's really a bummer to have not, I don't know, not read The Room. Me and you have been talking about a Section 31 series or movie for 20 years, maybe more. And like, it is such a bummer to see this thing be such a disappointment.
Here's the thing, though.
You were mentioning the Rift. I got to say the Rift thing. The end of the freaking movie, they have the God's End or Godsend, and it is supposed to destroy a quadrant. And then, with no technobabble at all, they decide to send it into the Rift. I guess to destroy the Rift, which is what happens, but there's no explanation of how they know that will happen at all. All the people who created the Godsend are dead. I guess Georgiou maybe knows how it works, but they don't know anything about this Rift or how this Rift works. And so when they were doing that, I thought they were sending it through to destroy the Empire.
Yeah.
That's what it seemed like was happening.
I didn't think that. I thought they were destroying the Rift, but I thought they were like, oh, well, they kicked it off of a table and it activated. So, yeah, that makes fucking sense.
Well, even if they're doing that to get rid of the God's End, to destroy the Rift, like, they waited too long. They stood there. They didn't, like, speed the ship up. They didn't try to get through the Rift to protect the timeline. They didn't do any of that. They just stood there, and it barely crossed the threshold before the bomb went off, and it was just like, you risked 2 universes. You gambled 2 universes in the hope that the Godsend went off right when they're passing the, like, you know, iris of this thing, so that it would close the anomaly, which they never explained would happen. It was so bad. I hated that ending so much.
Yeah, I hated that. I hated that. I thought it was stupid. None of the characters got there on merit or knowledge or anything. It was just like, I don't know what to do. It's fucking going off. Let's just throw it into the Rift. I
will say they had the murder mystery of who's the mole, and I did like that they gave us enough information to figure it out, because I definitely knew it was Fuzz, like a good ways back, and I knew how he'd done it. Like I like a good mystery where you get all the elements to the mystery and you're able to piece it together. Like, we knew that he could go into electronics and control them. We knew that Zeph had killed himself at some point. Even before that, we knew that Zeph was dead. And like,
but they did it so on the nose. It was like they handed us a piece of paper and they said match the items, and it was like an apple with an apple slice, an orange with an orange slice. You know, it was so easy.
I hear you. I think it would have been better if it had been over the course of 6 episodes. Like, if I'm serious, if all of those elements that we learned about and all the little, we know there's a mole. Let's say it's like episode 2, we know there's a mole. Well, episode 1, you know there's a Godsend. And like, that's they have to stop it. Yeah. They conscript Georgiou. Episode 2, you find out somehow that there is a mole. And then 3, 4, 5, you sort of get all these little pieces, and it wouldn't be so packed together. And then you get to the point where you find out it's Fuzz, which the big reveal there, mid-season finale. Fuzz is the mole, and Shan's alive. Like, all of that would be a great first half of a season of a show, or could be if done well. Which I don't have much faith would have been done well.
In my head, it's the end of the first episode of Firefly, where Jane's like, what about when the money's good enough? Oh, that'll be an interesting day. And then we get Ariel, where the money is good enough, and he betrays them all.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think we might be the only Star Trek podcast to consistently grade Star Trek against Firefly.
I don't see why. They should all be doing that.
Yeah.
That's another problem with this, is like, we've talked about how cool it would be to have like a show like Firefly that's just about regular people getting along, like a scavenger ship, getting along in the Star Trek universe. How fun that could be. But I feel like this one kind of tried it. Like, I know they're Section 31, but they don't really feel at all like Section 31 to me. They feel like a ragtag band of people, and they're literally on a garbage ship. Like, the whole thing felt like they were going for that sort of Firefly vibe. But then, it disappoints me because this was bad, and it was so poorly received that it will put a bad taste in the mouths of Star Trek, that they're not going to want to do this kind of a story anytime soon.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying earlier. I don't think I got around to saying it all, but you have these, it's something I've wanted to see in Star Trek for a really long time, where you have these sort of out there characters like the cyborg and like the little alien and the robot and all these crazy things that you just like, God, all of this is possible in this universe. They could really, do some crazy stuff and do like such a tonal difference from Star Trek. But because they chose to do it this way, now they will never want to go back to anything like that because, we saw how that worked in Section 31.
Right.
No, the fucking movie was bad. It was written poorly.
Exactly.
Like, it was edited poorly. Like when she's fighting Sand, and like, how many times do we need to see them like flash back to them touching foreheads and saying, "We are two, we are one, we are two, Dude, like we remember from the beginning when
it's only been 90 minutes.
He said we are two, and she said no, and he said we are one or whatever. She's like no longer, and she like scars him, and takes him down. Like now while they're fighting, oh I love you, forehead. Like it's like how many times do they go back and show Hal Jordan's dad's plane exploding in that awful Green Lantern movie? Like, we've seen it. Stop showing me the flashback. I know. Right. And also stop reminding me that she was like a terrible fucking homicidal, genocidal piece of shit. Like, stop.
Yeah.
We're supposed to like her. Also, and I think you started to hint at this earlier, but like that opening was good. It was really powerful, like showing her killing her family. It was
absolutely
tragic and heartbreaking. And then they changed it from like space age Game of Thrones to now we're in like a heist spy thriller romp. It's a comedy. Everyone's got a quirky thing to say. Instead of actual character development.
Right. And it's a little too, that whole setup scene needed like a lot more rewrites, and it needed on-set rewrites because the kind of things you find out on set is like, oh, this is all very clever dialogue, but when you say it in rapid succession, no one can understand what's going on. And they needed like someone, they needed a writer on set. Like the fact that they worked through the strike was probably a bad call. Because I do think this would have been really helped out by like just a little bit of like rewrites and like figure out where their chemistry is and then like lean into that. And that's something that happens over a season of a show all the time. But when you're working on a pilot, you do all kinds of reads and rewrites and like you figure out how it's flowing. And that scene was written very tightly, and then when it comes out, like it's just way too frantic, like way too frantic. Couldn't really follow what was happening with like some of the characters, like having to catch up on like wait, what is his deal? Like I didn't understand what was going on with Fuzz at first, because they cut to that big, they said actually this isn't Fuzz, and then they zoom into his mouth, but then show his like, they kept calling him a Vulcan, which made me think it was a Vulcan, but then it was full of android, whatever components. And I was just like, okay, is he, I guess he's not a real that's not a human. That's not a Vulcan body being controlled. And then I thought it was being controlled from that big, I thought that guy was like in an aquarium. They cut to him, he was huge. He was talking about the scale. And I was like, oh, is he a huge guy that's controlling Fuzz? And then it cut to, and later I had to catch up and realize that Fuzz was the tiny little guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had no trouble understanding all of that. I did wonder continuously why the little alien was Irish.
See, I will say that's one thing I did like, actually. I liked that actor played as Irish in that scene, and then later on, when he came back, it was his wife and it was a completely different accent. I really liked that. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah. I don't know. It was just weird. That was a weird choice for me, but I didn't have any real problem with like the character's setup. I was just like, okay, all right, cool. But then like we just didn't get anything of substance from any of them, and the Fuzz character specifically was really grating.
Yeah,
I didn't. Small things survive big explosions. I was like, oh, that'll come back.
Right, for sure.
It was like they just had a knack in this movie of like putting a certain kind of button on the phrases I knew were coming back.
Yeah, in
such an obvious way. I was just like, ugh. Like I was groaning when they were happening.
Well, it's set up and payoff, and again, I think it had to do with the truncated timetable because I think they were going to be setting these things up in other episodes, and they were supposed to come back, and then it was just like so truncated, and
something that can't be blamed on the script. The Dutch angles during the fight scenes with the flamethrower effects. I know I have talked about this on Discovery. While people are fighting, I don't know why they do this, where like they have explosions and then there are flames all over the ship. Mm-hmm. And as they're fighting, like one of them will grab the other one, throw them down, and as they like throw them down, like the flames blaze fast, higher for a second. And this like the flames are choreographed with the action.
Yeah.
And it looks like it should be a stage show.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work in movies. It looks like shit. It looks incredibly false.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I totally agree with you. It's sort of the new, we used to have like the jokes about Star Trek and how the scenes were like the shaky, they were just shaking and it's just the people like falling all over the ship. I feel like it's kind of like that. Now we've got these just big, like, I don't know, pyrotechnics happening off the edge of the set. Like, one of them that really bothered me was, it was clear to me it was an editing issue. Like they had edited the final battle scene and they were editing together the fight between Fuzz and the garbage ship and then the fight with Georgiou and San. And there was a big explosion outside the ship, and the big explosion was the garbage ship blowing up that little doll, which was fun. But again, it felt like something that was like missing a setup somewhere.
Yeah, like I felt like, did Fuzz accidentally get into that doll? Because that's what it seemed like.
What? No.
Because like when they send the garbage out into the void or whatever.
Yeah.
Out into space and it blows up, like Fuzz is wait, oh no, and he blows up. So like,
oh no, I think that was just the doll. The doll was like a
Fuzz was in
doll.
the doll somehow.
Oh, I don't think so. I think that
I don't know.
Fuzz was inside his ship, inside like the body, and he was like, oh, he saw it come at him. But again, the fact that was what would they call it, a groon, what race? They said it was some race that used a kind of a kind of whatever.
They used a certain power source.
Yeah.
Was
they named it like
toxic
it was like
or something,
the Groon or something like that,
or highly flammable.
That all felt very Doctor Who. A lot of this felt like they were going for like a Doctor Who-ish tone. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that was just the thing was just talking as a like as it does, like the little doll talks.
Oh yeah, no, I know that. The doll was doing its own programming and everything. Yeah. But the way they edited it, it looked like they threw it out the hatch and then it looked like Fuzz mistakenly went inside the doll instead of wherever he was, or I don't know. I was confused about that. Like, it looked like he was inside the doll. I was like, what are they saying? That he was inside the doll?
That's funny. No, I didn't get that, but I see why you'd be confused. Part of the problem of having a microscopic character, like when they cut to his face, you're like, there's no context for him. Yeah. Oh, what I was going to say, though, is there's that big explosion, and then at that exact moment, the fight between Georgiou and San is rocked, as if that explosion affected them, but they were not. Yeah. They were not shown. We were not shown in space how those two chase sequences were relating to each other at all. Yeah. So we don't know. We didn't know that was close enough to affect that fight, and it was clear to me that there was like an effect shot missing. Like, they should have shown the outside of the ship, and it, like, the shock wave from the explosion hit the ship and it rocks Georgiou and San's fight, but they just didn't have that shot in there. It was just very strange.
Yeah, well, because it wasn't in the script and they couldn't write another thing.
Yeah, probably so.
That's what I feel throughout this entire movie is they could not. They knew it needed to be there, probably. Like, oops, we didn't include a line about why San is still the correct age. Yeah. It feels like in editing, someone in continuity should have caught that and been like, hey, we need a scene. We need to do like a pickup shot and have...
Right,
nope, we can't do that.
Can't do that. Yeah. Oh, well. Well, I'm pretty unhappy with this one. I think it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I think it's terrible.
As I think you've all heard. Did we have any feedback about it yet or anything?
Yeah, we do have some feedback, and I just want to say, aside from the writing issue with the strike, I feel like they are begging for attention from an audience that has no interest in Star Trek anything. They're not going to subscribe to the flailing Paramount Plus. They're not going to be buying Section 31 merchandise, which is fine because Paramount won't have any for them to buy. I keep up with toys. I keep with all this shit. As they're putting us stuff out, there's nothing in the stores. There's nothing to buy for Star Trek. I would buy it. I am that guy.
Right.
I would buy Section 31 action figures. I don't like the movie. I think it's the worst thing I've seen in quite some time. I would buy the action figures. They don't have action figures.
Yeah.
But they're also courting this completely apathetic general audience and alienating the fans who do want more Star Trek.
Right.
I think it's a slippery slope. But yeah, this person didn't say anything to us specifically. We do follow each other, I think, on Twitter, but Mark Amorosi said this, and I just laughed, and I had to include it. He said, Star Trek Section 31 makes Star Trek 5 look like Citizen Kane. Now, I did put out a blast that said, like, give us your thoughts. We'll read them on the show. Robin Avalon on Threads said, best I can give is 5 out of 10. Characters were flat, stereotypical, pacing was off, acting was uneven, plot was weak, and the Vulcan robot / micro parrot face squid duo with the broad brogue as the master villain was annoying as all hell and unbelievable. Didn't have room for this last one. The on the tweet, she said the writing, the dialogue was noticeably stilted and frankly a substandard for Star Trek.
Yeah, for sure.
Sapphire Evolution on Facebook said, it was awesome. See, someone liked it.
Hey, well, good.
Jeff Simmons on Facebook said, I rank it with Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, a movie that should not have been made. Andre Sparks said, I didn't think it was bad. Standard mission / revenge story. The only thing I didn't like was some of the camera work. Yes, I would watch a sequel. Looks like we won't see one for 2 to 3 years, though. I don't think we'll see one, Andre.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, I don't think this one's getting a sequel. I mean, like, the way they left it really does feel like they were like, well, I guess we'll still have another episode, but that's not in the works right now, I don't think. I think it was always, once Michelle Yeoh won the Oscar, and like this show was always kind of, I just thought they'd reduce her role, you know what I mean? But it turns out it was going to be like the Georgiou show, not just a Section 31 show featuring Georgiou. And
this had nothing to do with Section 31.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This
Right.
movie had nothing to do with Section 31.
Yeah, not the one that we know at all.
Yeah.
We don't
Which
know
we
it that
didn't-
well.
Yeah, like on DS9, like Section 31 was Sloan. That's all we knew. He would show
Right.
up and shady shit would happen, and then poof, he was gone just like that. You know,
Yeah.
usual suspect shit. Burpee Brown over on Threads, I love that name, Burpee Brown, said kinda a wacky mashup and an attempt at Star Trek and Mission Impossible, but I ain't mad at it. Also on Threads, Maypo81 says, love Michelle Yeoh. The movie was not my taste. The feedback we're all waiting for. Stu Little. Stu says, hello.
Hello, Stu.
I did not particularly care for this. Take care.
The shortest Stu Little feedback we've ever received.
That's it. That's all he wrote.
Yep, that's funny. That's fair. It's a fair thing to write. Yeah, it's just a bummer. They're like I wasn't sure how long we'd talk because like I just felt after watching it like, well, that was just not what I wanted. Like I don't know what else to say. And obviously we've talked for like almost an hour about it, but like
Yeah.
there's just
Yeah.
didn't live up to my expectations at all. And I didn't have expectations of what it should be, really. It's just like my expectations of what Star Trek is. One of the biggest things I love about Star Trek, and really any media, is just like, I like when characters make decisions and that those character decisions are interesting. And this movie felt like characters just fight. They're just fighting. They're just like solving problems and fighting, but the problem solving was very limited by Star Trek standards, and it was mostly just like fighty fight, chasey chase. Did not feel like they were making interesting decisions ever, especially like moral decisions. You know, it was just there's a bad guy going to destroy the world. There was there was not even any like interesting like should we or should we not trust Georgiou conversations. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, they mistrusted her because she was the emperor, and like there's also a mole, so there's like conversations about her being the mole, but like we all knew she wasn't. They just never had, to me, the thing had no moral interesting no interesting moral moments at all.
No interesting moral moments, no interesting character moments, really. No interesting reason for it to be part of the Star Trek universe. It has really nothing to say about Star Trek or that universe. You know, my biggest regret, though, looking at it the way it is, I kind of want the next episode.
Sure.
Because they're going to Trikana 4. Trikana
What is
4
Trikana 4?
It was a human colony. It was an Earth colony that basically devolved into like factions and civil war. It's where Tasha Yar was from. Like, rape gangs were
in the
prevalent.
first episode of TNG, they talk about it.
Yeah, and also the Naked Now, and they touched on her story, but we got these little snippets of like how awful and war-ridden Turkana 4 was, and that
would have been really cool to touch on, but they just teased it and will likely never return.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Anyway, well, my friend, that's all I got to say. You got anything else?
I don't have anything else. I'll come back with more classic reviews. I don't know when we get the next Star Trek.
Strange New Worlds,
would it
I'm
be?
assuming it would be, right?
I would guess. Strange New Worlds. What is it? Season 3?
Season 3 premiere date. It just says 2025. Man.
Yeah.
That sucks. Well, I'm sure we'll have a news episode soon or something. We haven't had one in a while, so it shows something's going on.
Yeah. Me and Effie will come back with more original series reviews.
Yeah, for sure.
In the meantime,
we have Strange New Worlds on the air. Section 31 is over, it seems. Is that... And Lower Decks is over. And Discovery's over, of course. We got... So the big thing that we got coming is Starfleet Academy.
Starfleet Academy, Strange New Worlds, and if Netflix ever decides to renew it, Prodigy.
Oh, right. Yeah, I hadn't heard anything about that lately.
Yeah. It doesn't look good.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we'll be back with more reviews and more things soon, hopefully, here on the Star Trek universe. Peace. Joel Untrue.
Live long and prosper. Eat a bag of dicks. All the things we say.
Yeah, all the things we regularly say.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Thank you for listening to the Star Trek Universe Podcast, a Stranded Panda production. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv for his web videos. If you'd like to hear more from Matthew Carroll, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or listen to his music. Just search for Matthew Carroll anywhere you get music.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.